Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. Krystal, what's on the show today?
So much good stuff in the show today. We've got Jeff Weaver, top Bernie Sanders campaign aide, on the show to talk about what their plan is going forward. We got a bunch of new polls. We got to look at the different candidates' coalitions. But most importantly, guys, we hit 50,000 subscribers. Thank you. Exciting day.
Right.
All that and more today on Rising.
Good morning, everybody. Krystal, what's on your radar?
So, I kind of sort of opened a whole can of worms this weekend. Let me explain. There is new data out from Pew Research confirming that, contrary to conventional media wisdom, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders appeal to strikingly different coalitions. In particular, of all the candidates, Warren's coalition is the most highly educated and the whitest. Bernie's is actually the least likely to be college educated and the least white. R.I.P. Bernie Bros narrative. These different coalitions fit with other polling that we've seen, and also fits with the fact that Warren and Sanders have seemed to rise in the polls simultaneously post-debate, so they're not in fact cannibalizing each other's supporters. Now, I have my theories about why all of this is, but shockingly, just because I think it doesn't always make it correct. So I did what one does. I asked Twitter. I asked people who had strong feelings for Warren and against Bernie, or for Bernie and against Warren, to explain why, and they definitely did that. Nearly 3,000 people chimed in about how they felt, and it was actually fascinating, surprisingly substantive, considering, Twitter. I want you all to know that I read all of what was posted through yesterday evening, and there were some really interesting and common themes. The idea, for example, that Bernie had been more consistent and showed up for fights that Warren did not. Standing Rock and Warren's politically calculated Clinton endorsement in 2016 came up a lot, as did her tepid support of Medicare for All. But if you boiled a lot of the conversation down, it really came down to something we talk about here a lot: theories of political change. And as you all know, for me, this is the most important issue. Here's a pro-Bernie framing that I thought really cut right to the heart of the matter. Warren wants to redistribute through top-down bureaucracy. Sanders wants to democratize political power. By the way, you can find Irami on YouTube as The Funky Academic. He's got some good stuff posted there. Warren supporters, too, talked a lot in their way about theories of change. They described Warren as more pragmatic, more realistic. I thought this one was really interesting. So this person said that Bernie loses me and my progressive friends when he says things like felons in prison should vote. How about we concentrate on voter suppression, etc. first? Warren is more practical choice for me. And Alan Redux is absolutely right. Fighting for incarcerated persons to vote is not practical in any sense of the word. There's no pollster who would tell you to take this position, no panel of Midwestern moms who would back letting murderers or drug dealers vote. But for Sanders supporters, that's kind of the point. And if you're committed, as Irami said, to democratizing political power, this is an important, even a vital fight. Just think about this. If you can disenfranchise any group of people you don't like simply by trapping them in our mass incarceration system, you can do pretty much anything you want. And make no mistake, that is in fact a core part of why so many black and brown men are criminalized in this way. But it's even worse than just having your political power stripped away. Federal prisons are often located in rural red state America. Those held are counted by the census for purposes of apportioning political power, even as they are denied the ability to exercise that power. So their bodies are literally being used to empower Republican politicians with whom they often profoundly disagree and who have really profoundly harmed them. It's a key difference between Sanders and Warren. One candidate looks at voting for incarcerated persons and says, "I'm sorry, I just don't see a lever that exists for me to pull to make this happen." The other says, "We will build the damn lever." This is actually the most important dividing line within the Democratic primary contenders. Warren, Biden, Buttigieg, Harris. They have some different policy ideas, but they're all planning to play the game as it exists. Out of the folks that I just named, there is zero doubt in my mind Warren would play the game the best. She's brilliant. She knows what to do. She is very experienced working those levers of government. But what if that's not enough? Not enough to combat a climate crisis and a white nationalist crisis and an automation crisis? What if the idea of working together for change with Mitch McConnell is more of an unworkable fantasy than democratizing power through a political revolution? It may not be practical, but it might be the best shot we've got. Did you look at any of this thread? This was amazing.
I read much of it, and the thing is, I deeply sympathize with what they're talking about, but I have a caution warning light, which is I watched this happen with Trump.
Right.
We were promised the moon. We were promised all this. The people who believe these things are largely there was the people, and then there was Trump and some, I think it's like the oddballs of the political class for many years. But here's the thing: this is a powerful place. You have to work through the institutions. It's terrible. One of the things that I remember, I think Hillary Clinton said this, and one of the only smart things she said in the 2016 campaign trail, whenever she was saying that, listen, ultimately, it took Lyndon Johnson cutting deals with the Dixiecrats to get civil rights passed. Martin Luther King and all of the rallies in the world could not blow through the filibuster of the United States Senate.
But where did it start? That is where, and
absolutely.
That's what created the political pressure to make that happen.
You have to do both.
But a couple of things that I would say are really different about Sanders' coalition. And look, I agree with, this is a nearly impossible task.
Yes.
It really is. I mean, things are so entrenched here. All the barriers that you speak to are totally correct. However, one thing that's very different about Sanders' coalition is it is truly multiracial. It is the true multiracial working class. Trump's coalition was never that. It was only ever white working class. And other whites as well. But in terms of the people who can sort of exert that political pressure from the ground up, it's a very different looking coalition. And also, look, Trump had no freaking clue what to do. He staffed his administration with Goldman Sachs people, didn't know what he was doing. Sanders has been here a long time and actually has gotten things done. I mean, look, Amazon lifted their wages to $15 an hour because of Sanders and the political pressure he was able to bring. People would have said that's impossible. That's the sort of thing he's been able to pull off.
There's no question to me that Bernie is excellent at moving the Overton window. But I would caution to anybody, which is you need to understand, when you enter the White House, there are thousands of positions that need to be filled. Do you know how they get filled? Through the think tanks, through the political class here in D.C. Guess who doesn't believe in anything that Bernie Sanders does? I don't think there are enough qualified bodies in order to fill what would need to be filled under a Bernie administration, and that's just my only caution, which is you have to understand how things have to work here, because otherwise it becomes a huge clash.
The last thing I'll say on this is I think because this is his second go-round, that sort of infrastructure has been building out since 2016, and there's far more in place now than would have been if he had won back in 2016.
Absolutely.